Thank you very much, dear friends. It's always a great pleasure to be back in this great nation. As an Omani who served in India, it's more pleasurable to see such a dialogue between not only policymakers, but also between intellectuals, business, but more importantly, between people to people. And this is exactly what we are looking for in such a contest. Thanking the Observer Research Foundation for their invitations, and it's always a pleasure to be here with you today. The geostrategic significance of Oman is not only historical, that dates to several millennia, with Indian sailors, merchants, intellectuals, and men of faith traversed the Arabian Sea and the Oman Sea, that has exchanged skills, goods, ideas, and so on. But today, this significance has proven the reliability and the confidence of both sides. The relationship has required a multidimensional character. No need to remind friends that Oman was the first gateway to the Arabian Sea with which the Indian military has joined exercises. The strong defense and security partnership with a special focus on a maritime security has valuable constructive approach. In recent years, Oman and India has cooperated in ensuring maritime security in the Indian Ocean. The robust defense cooperations would hopefully at the same level of the economic relations. One should hope that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic would give a different perspective on how India and the Gulf countries could shape the post-pandemic era. The economic recovery after the pandemic and the building of ties would give a fresh look into the ongoing trends of relationships between the two sides. The clear favor of clean energy and the attendance needed of skilled manpower and the paramount of importance of connectivity, both physical, to explore a new trade link, and digital to shape a new regional value chain. As the population in the Gulf countries increases, it is predicted that the water conservation is a new era of cooperations between India and the GCC to sustain a better quality of life over the long term, given that both regions are facing water stress according to the World Resources Institute report in 2019. Needless to say, the climate change should be of a similar importance for both sides. Food security, which I've heard this morning, most of us, has also a big concern for all the GCC nations. The example of 2007-2008, when the global food prices has caused an increase of prices 217%, has pushed many countries in the area to reconsider its agriculture and food security policy. There is a clear synergy in the GCC countries and India in consolidating a deeper cooperations in investments, education, and healthcare. In the GCC countries, digital technology is playing a central role in shaping the society's post-oil future. Having said that, India is a credible partner in developing digital education through local institutions and universities. One should also not forget that the Gulf states have almost 50 free zones, with many of them focusing on commerce and technological venture. Hence, virtual commercial zones would be of a great interest for the region. The port of Duqm in Oman is one of them. The ability of the Gulf countries and India to overcome some challenges to establish a new diversified framework of their relations, example, free trade formula, while navigating a post-COVID-19 stresses. The divergence perceptions of threats in the area between all partners should not disapprove the deeper dynamics that has maintained for decades. Given the importance of Oman on its location and historical connectivity today with the other GCC partnership, both sides in a clear commitment to deepen such engagements of partnership and a peaceful existence of our region. Thank you very much.
My name is Rivan D'Souza. I'm a journalist in Kuwait, and I would like to congratulate and welcome my eminent panel. I would like to begin by quoting the anecdote of my friend Mr. Walid, Abdullah, who mentioned about his great-grandfather coming, ship sinking somewhere around here, great-grandfather whose ship sunk somewhere around here, and you know, I think he lost everything. There was no insurance then. But to put it in perspective, every GCC citizen at some point had a great-grandfather, a grandfather trading with India. It's a long historical relationship. The subject we're speaking today is trade with trust. So we have had a lot of trust with the GCC, and the GCC likewise had a lot of trust with India to be trading with it long before even the Western countries came into the scene. So the question today that I like my panelists to answer is that this trust has not been leveraged into real terms trade. The potential is there. The potential is absolutely great. We have so many things in common, including competitive advantage, a geographical advantage, and so on and so forth. So what exactly is impeding this trade between India and the GCC? I know some of our speakers have also noted and mentioned this is a new India. We are looking at engaging much more with our neighborhood. So if I could start with Mr. Walid, who could tell us something about ideas or what, if there is some impediments, or how we could go the way forward.
Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here, and thank you for the question. If we start by discussing the rationale behind the economic cooperation between India and GCC, which is the main reason why we are here today. Of course, it seems to be obvious, given the long tradition of trade and investment flows between India and GCC countries. If you look at the figures we have in 22, India exported $44 billion to the GCC countries and imported around $110 billion. Of course, UAE stands at the first position. Now, of course, for India, it's obvious that India is seeking to bridge this deficit, this trade deficit. And for the GCC countries, they are always trying to diversify more their economies and their export basket, including, of course, the new concerns, the current concerns about the food security and the energy, and going even towards the high technology industries, without forgetting the fourth industrial revolution, of course. But I am sorry to say that I believe that history, culture, and the distance advantages, which are very good drivers for this economic cooperation, of course, they are not enough. We need, of course, to be pragmatic and to follow a more comprehensive approach when we deal or when we want to expand and to scale up the trade and investment relations flows between India and GCC countries. And this is why actually the negotiations about the FTA took so long. We are talking about almost 20 years now. For many reasons. First of all, we know there is evidence from other trade blocs and from research that removing trade barriers, it's not enough, because always non-tariff barriers remain behind. This is one. Second, because almost most of the trade blocs, they are open only to goods, not to services, which is very important for both sides, I mean. Then, if we look also at the average tariffs in the GCC countries, they are at almost 5% in the bloc, while the tariffs are much higher in India, especially in the agricultural commodities. They are about almost 40%. The average is 18%. Also, another problem is that GCC countries seem to be quite a little bit reluctant to signing FTAs. Actually, GCC countries are only part of 3 FTAs today. One, the Pan-Arabic Free Trade Area, and the second is the GCC itself, and the third is with Singapore, and that's it. Otherwise, they go individual, you know. Yes. And I thank very much our friend Mr. Siddiq, who said we have to look inside the bloc. There are individualities. There are different countries. They have different plans, strategies, and aspirations. And things are quite different between the 6 countries, and even inside the same country, in the mainland and in the free zones, we have different kind of laws and regulations. You know. Also, and this is very, very important to India, for GCC countries, services are very restricted in GCC countries. I don't want to single out one country, but Kuwait, for example, is one of the highest, has the highest restrictiveness index in services such as banking and so on, education and so on. So this is a problematic for India, because India has a lot to gain from services if we sign an FTA including services, and in many activities. I mean, in ICT, in banking, and in business services. And we know that GCC countries import a huge volume of services. So we have to be concerned about this element. Also, I will end with this: the disruptions of the supply chain and the value chain at the global level since the COVID. added another layer of uncertainty at the global level and also at the regional level, because now it reinforced the calls to go for self-sufficiency, yes, and to go regional. And here we need to revisit the global chains and the supply chains, but in a way that India and GCC countries, design a new collaboration in a way to make it fair and resilient for both sides, in a way that we build regional capacity, productive capacity, to shortcut the distances, and also to shortcut the number of participants of the regional value chain or supply chain as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walid. I think you answered all the questions I was going to ask, so I will not be asking you again. I'm just joking. Mr. Arun, what is your take on the trade opportunities for increasing the trade between India and the GCC in agri-products? Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more, because I think India is already exporting a huge amount of agri-products. But this, just to add, what many times we consider this as food security. Export of agri-products is not necessarily food security. It is a trade. So please go ahead.
So when I'm looking at agri and specifically exports, so there are certain commodities which are sensitive, which are necessary for a food security. If I give an example, in 2020, Russia banned export of wheat. Yeah. Vietnam, which is the third largest rice producer, they banned export of rice, yes, thanks to pandemic. And Kazakhstan, they absolutely banned all the wheat and wheat powder, all of it. So all of them were looking at their own internal consumptions and internal food security, and only if in case there was surplus were they in a position to export. The same is true of every other country. So people will export only if they are surplus. Like Brazil or Argentina, they are exporting soybean today because they are surplus countries. So when we are looking at India, are we food surplus? So we are food surplus in a particular year. Some years we are not food surplus. So therefore what we do is we do our own stocking. And in a year like this, when possibly when the global warming takes place, when the yield goes down, we use our stocks and possibly ensure that nobody goes without food. Now in 2020-21, when the food security globally was looked at, GCC had the maximum food security. They were among the best. They ensured that it was affordable, it was available. A country like Saudi Arabia has 12 months wheat stored in their warehouses today. So it's not a question of 1 year or one season that you are looking at exports. What you are looking at a long term and strategically what you can export or what you cannot. So I just gave an example of milk. We have about 259 million metric ton of milk production this year. If I'm looking at 2050, by then India will be the most populous country in the world. This will reach to 290 million metric ton at that point of time. And still we will be in a position to do about 350 milliliters of milk for everybody in the country. Now, if our programs of increasing the milk capacity of Indian livestock goes as per schedule, we will have 50 million metric ton extra milk. There is no reason for India not to export it, either process it and export it or process the milk by itself.
So you see a huge increase in food production.
So it will be, the production will be far surpassing the domestic demand and will be in a position to supply milk.
Yeah, so
same thing can be done for any other commodity, fruit and vegetable, we can do it. So in respect of all the commodities where we are surplus, we will be in a position to do it. All that is required is a long-term plan. Say, if I was speaking to somebody from Saudi Arabia and they were telling me that the Crown Prince at the moment is looking at an event, if the oil wells dry, what will happen to my country? And he's investing, preparing for that. Same way, whether we can look at, say, 25 years hence or 50 years hence, and look at whether we can have a GCC-India collaboration for supply of certain food products for next 30 years or 50 years. And then India produces only those for exports. The food parks work on those lines. Okay. Investment comes only for those and the quality and standards required. And the last bit, this whole ESG, which is coming into play now, environmental, social, that is something which both the countries, both the regions need to take care of. That will be very, very required going forward. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Abdullah Bahood, yeah, if you could just enlighten us a little bit more about your thoughts or opinions on how two-way trade, of course, the oil, but other goods and services can be increased, or what are the impediments that are, let's say, not giving these figures the reality that they, or the real potential that they deserve.
Thank you, sir. I just want to tell you that the Dow wasn't insured at that time, so I wish it was. Anyway, I think we've heard from many of the speakers this morning and this afternoon and the previous speakers in this panel of how this relationship between India and the Gulf states has roots in history, geography, human exchange, etc. And that is absolutely true. The question is, if you like, is despite all of this, historical links, geographical proximity, societal links, etc., why isn't the economic and trade and investment exchange as good or doesn't live up to the expectations? And I think this is where, this should be like the critical question, and this is what we should focus on. Obviously, there are many reasons for it, and it pertains to both sides as well. And let me just say a few of these and then talk about what the future could look like. I think there are some structural impediments within India in terms of, trade and investments, despite all of what, of the right environment that we've talked about. These are maybe relating to, if you like, your internal laws and regulations and so on. One of the previous speakers, or some of the previous speakers, were referring to sovereign wealth fund investments in India, and that is a very welcome sign. But sovereign wealth funds are one entity, very important as they may be. They do not substitute for SMEs, for small investors, etc. Still, the small investor or the medium-sized investor or individual investor, let's put it this way, is still reluctant to invest in India because of the laws, the regulations, etc. Sovereign wealth funds have their own system, and they have governments behind them, and they can employ sophisticated law firms, etc. But individual investors don't do that, and they go somewhere else where it is easy to invest, where it is transparent, where the system is easy. I think that also the Gulf states have failed to explain to the Indian community, the opportunities that do exist in the Gulf. So I think there are mistakes from both sides, and there is a lot that perhaps one can talk about to see where both sides can change this and improve it. Now, what does this tell us for the future? We can still sit here and lament ourselves and say, there are mistakes, etc. But what can we do for the future? I think there are plenty of opportunities. One is India is trying to find its own right place in the world economy and world politics.
Absolutely.
And it has a long way to develop, and it is developing, but it's a very slow pace, and it needs to do more in this regard. And obviously, it requires to open market, it requires to have investment, etc. But to do so, it needs to change as well. The Gulf states, I'm afraid, are rentier states.
Yes.
They are states that have relied so much on getting income from exporting oil and gas, and most of their focus is how to spend this money. Now, that is changing because there is now a challenge to the oil and gas, and this is not sustainable. So they are trying to diversify their economies. They are trying to become industrial countries. They're trying to, catch up with the rest of the world. I don't know to what extent they can do that, but they are trying. And India has the ability to be able to help them in that regard, manpower, knowledge, export, etc., joint ventures. There are plenty of things that they can do together. I think when we're talking about the relationship between India and the Gulf states, we have to remember it's not just about exporting commodities. Let's not make the same mistakes that Europe did with the Gulf states. What Europe did is they were only concerned about oil and gas. They were exporting, Gulf were exporting oil and gas, and Europe were exporting technology and goods and services. And then the FTA with Europe did not go anywhere, as you know. Now, there is an FTA that is being discussed between the Gulf states and or the GCC and India. And I think the first and foremost operative word here should be sustainability. Sustainability of the relationship. Not just short-term policies of, quick win, but sustainability, because this is a region that is close to each other. It has a lot of connections with each other, as has been explained. But we have a problem here, and I have to be honest with you. I come from the GCC states. I come from one of the members of the GCC states, which is Oman. I am a believer in GCC integration, but it's not happening. And this is another problem. The GCC is supposed to be a regional organization that works together, have common policies, common trade rules, etc., and it's good for the whole region. However, for political reasons, for ideological reasons, it's not happening. It's actually dying a slow death. And if we have a GCC like this, do you really want to have FTA with it? I question myself. And, what does the FTA means if there is not going to be a regional organization that survives? I think we are seeing some kind of reconfiguration that is happening in the region. We are seeing that perhaps the GCC will die like the Arab League is dying. But we are seeing maybe something that is coming up. We don't know what that is, but maybe some new bodies. Recently, in the meeting in Washington, D.C., the GCC states and Iraq, Jordan, and Egypt met with the US to discuss free trade agreement. So what does that tell us? When President Biden came to visit Saudi Arabia, not only the GCC states, but also these three non-GCC states were present. What does that tell us? Perhaps there is something that is going to be born. We don't know what that is, but if you know the mentality of some of our leaders in the region, you will understand. Things can change overnight. Things can happen, without any warning. So we may have another body that is not the GCC, but something else. I don't know. I would not dare to name it. But something that's going to come up. So I think we need to think about what is the FTA means for India. Obviously, having a regional-wide FTA is important. But as some of the previous speakers, you need to work also on bilateral relations, because we don't know for how long this GCC is going to survive.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. Mrs. Shwado Rao, yeah, could you share some of your experiences with the audience about your opinion on the free trade?
Sure. Thank you so much. I would like to thank at the outset Observer Research Foundation for inviting me to share my thoughts on the subject. Through the morning, we've heard a lot about the food security issue and how, you know, the GCC looked at West and we preferred to look at East. And now, instead of looking at West and East, we need to look at each other. All this has got necessitated with what's happened since 2020s, obviously. You know, you speak of black swan, but 2020s has ushered in a flock of swans, I would say black swans, starting with pandemic and then followed by the Ukraine-Russia conflict, has begged the question that should the world have been over-dependent on one country, on one region excessively for the supply of fuel, food grains, commodities, and the host of economic enablers for growth. So clearly what we talk today is more an outcome of what has happened since 2020s, and the whole issue of food security has arisen because Russia and Ukraine have been supplying food to the rest of the world by a huge margin. I would think that given the new dynamics in the since the early 2020s, I would think India is perhaps in a sweet spot as far as the geopolitics is concerned. It has been able to balance the conflicting regions, looking at its economic interests, putting them first, and leaving the geopolitics of it aside, not necessarily ignoring it, but economics getting precedence over anything else. And perhaps that stands in good stead because at the end of the day, you need to ensure that you are extremely secure in your economy, providing incomes and jobs to your own people first, and then look at the rest of the softer issues. I think that is an important approach. And with this approach, probably India has looked at herself as being more proactive and not reactive in the regional leadership play. Today, India is reaching out in a more dynamic manner than elsewhere, than earlier before. And contrarily, on the other side, all the other regions have been more actively looking at India. Obviously, a 1.4 billion people market is attractive to any country, any region, and that is where India serves itself as the biggest economic opportunity for partnering and sharing economic prosperity with the world. Having said, coming to your specific question as to how we can look at India-GCC, I would, sitting in Mumbai, there are two things that I would like to focus on. Rest of the issues have been covered earlier. Two things are very clearly, India needs long-term finance, and it was earlier touched upon by Mr. Sadiq Bakir and here by Mr. Abdullah. Yes, sovereign funds, wealth funds are very important. Currently, I think for India, the most active would be perhaps Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, but there are three others who also can participate in a much bigger manner. India needs long-term funds, infrastructure funds to specifically name, and that is where, in my opinion, sovereign wealth funds will play a large role. To the specific point that Mr. Abdullah raised about why not retail has got enthused about participating in Indian markets, perhaps Indian regulatory and financial landscape has been focusing on its own financial inclusion story, and India first needs to ensure that the Indian population itself is completely included in the formal finance sector, and then of course look beyond the shores, beyond the boundaries. The second thing, and I'm not meaning it in a non-trivial manner, it may appear very light, but there are two aspects. One is the soft power that perhaps India has hitherto unutilized, And what do I mean by soft power? It's media and entertainment and sports. And to me, this becomes an important tool for breaking ice. I would think sports and media and entertainment are these two sectors, are these two areas where the engagement can be far more deeper, not just with UAE, but the other countries as well within GCC. And the reason is we all have been articulating since morning that both countries, India and the region GCC, have youth population as a large portion. And believe me, these two areas can enthuse the youth most in a mutual engagement. And this could be the starting point, in my opinion, to start a more, serious, I'm not saying that these are not serious, but in a more meaningful and a more sustainable manner. But clearly, soft power is something that we could tap to utilize much more than it is currently being used. I think, as I said, fortunately, India and GCC have, over the last couple of decades, have looked beyond energy and gems and jewelry. The diversification has become extremely important for both the regions. How do you expand the trade, not just of merchandise, but more importantly of services, investments? I think these are the areas where I feel that, and all the sectors have been talked of. I don't want to repeat what has been said since morning. It is climate financing, climate green energy. And talking of green energy, have we explored what perhaps Australia and ASEAN are doing at this point in time of creating solar parks and then transporting solar energy, stored solar energy through undersea channels and cables? And I think the geographical and natural proximity would be with the GCC and India. Of course, currently it may serve to be an extremely expensive proposition because you need to have, economic cost per unit extremely affordable to be able to harness that in a mainstream use of the green energy, particularly renewable energy in the form of solar. But we need to explore, we need to engage in serious R&D as to how to make it more affordable through solar farms in the GCC, transportation of the solar stored energy into the economy and so on. So I think there are humongous areas where India and GCC have engaged. Of course, to some extent, it has remained lopsided with just one or two countries within GCC. They're seeing a significant scope to broaden the same engagement in trade and services with the other 4 nations within GCC. And I think given the perch position of India where it stands today, I would say a more proactive approach that has, as you had alluded to earlier, that in recent times, India seems to be reaching out and engaging much more in a dynamic fashion. I think there is a lot of scope. So sustainability, I totally resonate with your view that it should not be that, oh, this is a stopgap arrangement because West is in stress and we need to look elsewhere. We are digressing from the question.
Sorry. We are digressing from the question. It's just about improving trade. We're not talking about sustainability. We're not talking about...
No, trade in a sustainable manner.
Yeah, but...
it would be trade of goods and services and investment flows.
Thank you. I'll move to to Mrs. Chandrika Sinha. Can you just give us very briefly, we're running out of time, your take before I probably have one more chance for a question to cap on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I on?
Yeah, it's okay.
So I'll just, since I'm coming in last and you've allowed me a few minutes, I'll try not to repeat what has already been said by my esteemed panelists. What I'd like to also draw attention to is that we've heard a lot about agri and food security and energy security, but I think both India and the GCC are now moving beyond those conversations, with even the strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia having actually 4 working groups that are looking at more than these 2 issues. They are looking at industry and infrastructure, and more importantly also technology and innovation. And let me just start from that aspect. And ma'am has already spoken about how the sovereign wealth funds investments would be helpful in rebuilding our infrastructure, and that is where the government's efforts to the national infrastructure pipeline, the national monetization pipeline, has seen a lot of interest from the Gulf region. And apart from ADIA, there's also Public Investment Fund and Mubadala and ADQ, who have also invested in the private sector in India. As we all know, the $3 billion investment in Reliance, and they are betting on the Indian economy driving the internet going forward in the world. So, and coming to the startup ecosystem, as I think it's been talked about since morning, we are one of the fastest growing ecosystem in the world. We're already the third largest. And recently at the Dubai Expo, the government of India actually took 100 startups to Dubai Expo, which received a lot of interest from the Gulf countries, investors from the Gulf countries. And these were in areas not just in agri or food security, but fintech, health tech, edtech, software services. Not just the capital from the Gulf region is acting as a fuel to these startups, but they are also helping these startups expand into the Gulf and also North Africa. In fact, 10 days back, Ninja Cart, one of our upcoming unicorns, actually announced in Dubai their latest foray, and it is backed by Walmart and Tiger Capital. So they've chosen to launch in Dubai. So that is how close these ecosystems are already ingrained. And coming to, I'll talk about, Sir talked about the structural constraints that are currently probably not allowing us to attract the manufacturers from the rest of the world. But Sir, believe me, the government of India is very, very serious about developing India as a global manufacturing hub, and which is why we had the launch of the National Logistics Policy just last week, where very focused target has been set, and we hope to actually be in the top 25 countries of the world, move up very significantly in the logistic innovation competitive index. And with that, the focus is on, improved turnaround timings at ports, more logistics infrastructure at airports. And this is also an area where the Gulf, which has companies like DP World, which are already seen as experts in this area, where their knowledge and expertise can help drive us forward in this area. So this constraint of the not being competitive enough, that also we hope to overcome. So along with the Make in India and the National Logistics Policy, we very much would like to be the base for manufacturers to use from us to go on to the ASEAN region. And that is where the goods and services would also increase. And in terms of services, I think the education services is also one area where India can really offer a lot. As I think somebody mentioned during the course of the day, that the IIT is being set up. And human resource development of the young population in the Gulf would really help these economies to move from an oil-based economies to also the knowledge and innovation economy. That, I think, also is where India has a role. Along with our export of health services and all the Heal in India, that would attract a lot of inbound patients. So along with this manufacturing, this trade, innovation, and infrastructure investment, there's a lot more that is going to come up soon. And by what other speakers before me have talked about, that India has very deliberately turned its attention to bolster the region of the India and the Gulf space. I think there's a lot more to be seen, and so we hope to address your concerns very soon, and a lot more investment should be coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just quickly sum up, and if you could answer very, very briefly. What we understand from the conversations is that, and especially Mr. Abdullah made a remark, the GCC dealing with them in FTA homogeneously is probably not the best idea. So individually with individual countries, like the CPA is an example, which the Minister of Trade of UAE mentioned that after signing the CPA, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, trade has gone up multifold. So do you think it would be wise for India to sign individual agreements rather than look at this comprehensively as a body that I mentioned in a very short,
Yes.
in a very short time, because you know the organizers are going to kill me. The time is running out. Yes.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, it might be a good solution to go individually.
Sorry?
And it might be a very good solution.
To go individually.
Yes, to sign, bilateral.
Yeah.
This is what happened with UAE, and I believe Oman is coming soon. We say that because, as I said, there are a lot of differences between these
Absolutely.
countries.
Mr. Anil, what do you think?
We already have 2 FTAs.
Yeah.
And the first one which we signed
was
signed in just 80 days.
Yeah, but we're talking about the other states as well. So you think it would be, yeah.
If we can sign the FTA in 80 days, why do we wait?
Yeah.
Sorry.
The mic is there. Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah.
I said if we can sign a FTA in 80 days flat with UAE, why can't we do it for the rest 5? We already have 2 of them.
But you know the other FTA has been going on for decades.
Exactly. So it is better that we do individually rather than...
Mr. Abdullah, beside talking about the geopolitics, only the economy, we don't want to go into whether GCC will exist as a block or not, only the economic part of the question, whether we sign individually rather than homogeneously with the whole GCC.
As someone who believes in regional grouping and regional integration, I believe that it will be better to sign something at a group level, because that will be easier, and then you have a much larger market, as it were. But given what we've just said about the problems within the GCC and how long it took for the FTA to take place, and even now, because of inter-GCC rifts and complexes that is happening within the GCC, I honestly, personally, I don't think that this organization is going to survive. But these organizations don't die quickly. It's just
but
a nature.
Trade will survive. Trade will survive.
So, trade will survive, but
So
the organization as such...
We need to increase that.
Yes, and maybe in that case, maybe you keep all your options open.
Absolutely.
Go for individual, and
thank you.
Don't rule out the group discussion.
Madam
I thought I'd exhausted my time for 2 rounds, but on a serious note,
sorry to cut you off.
On serious note, I think the current environment would warrant perhaps an expeditious approach towards achieving the goals.
Yeah. What would you like to add?
Sure. I think we are all living in a very pragmatic world, and you pick whatever is the most strategic, and I think India is doing that. And I think even the Gulf countries are doing that. They are all are negotiating bilateral agreements, and even in the startup space, for example, we have a startup bridge with Qatar and India. We have a startup bridge with UAE and India. It is nothing. It's supposed to be joined. So
absolutely,
it's fine.
So thank you very much. But if anybody has a question to ask, we have some. Maybe we could take 2 questions or 1 if there's time.
Hi, my name is Srinath. I'm from the private sector. I just want to provoke a question. Markets, capitalism, you said open bridge between countries, startups. Markets find their own way. Investments find their own way. If something is attractive, history has told us people went beyond high seas. Then why are governments needed? Why are cooperations needed? What role do governments play in a lot of these? Because even if you stifle innovation, markets still find a way to get going. And I'm specifically asking Mr. Abdullah because you said that the concept of GCC could slowly die and something else could come up. So does it really matter for markets, trade?
Any other question before we... Okay, I think it's okay. Mr. Abdullah, you can answer that.
Thank you. But before I answer your question, which is quite difficult, I love that. But let me just say something. I really also love the idea of soft power and entertainment, sports, etc. The only thing that crossed my mind is that we are terrible at playing cricket, and you're no good at playing football. So I think it's going to be difficult for us. But anyway, I think it'll be great to have something with the GCC because it's a regional organization, and then you have 6 countries, and if it increases or if they enlarge the GCC and they bring in other countries, it will even be better. But given what we have seen lately, I don't think the GCC as an organization, I think it lost trust within the GCC. But as I told you, regional organizations don't die very quickly. They take a long time, they smell, they get rotten, but they still continue to be there because there are some bureaucrats who likes to keep going. However, I think, as you're correct, trade does not stop there. It's a human nature. We trade at all levels. So I think India has an opportunity to trade with individual countries, whether there is an organization or not. It's better to have a regional-wide agreement, but if it doesn't work, go for a bilateral one, which is happening anyway. And we are seeing even Israel is signing agreements, bilateral agreements with the GCC countries. And let me just tell you this, and I finish with that. When you sign FTA with an individual country, it goes against the letter and the spirit of the regional organization, of the custom union. The custom union means that you all have one same custom. So when you sign FTA with one of them, you basically break the rules. And this is what happened when in 2009, I think, Oman and Bahrain signed FTA with the United States. And there was big problems within the GCC. And now we are seeing, they are making the same mistake again. The UAE is doing it differently. Oman is going one way. Bahrain is going another. Saudi Arabia. So, the whole idea of this, custom union agreement and common market is dying. And it died, from my way of looking at it, died some time ago. But it's taking time for the funeral. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So to sum it up, I think there's a lot of goodwill and a lot of trust with India. And I think the Arabs, the GCC countries, sing Bollywood songs, they eat Indian food. The only thing is now to leverage that and probably look at ways how we can increase our trade. Thank you so much. Pleasure. And we conclude. Yeah.